All right, here we go. Unfortunately, stuck inside, and I'll do these shares, just this one more from inside, and then tomorrow I will have the truck will be empty, all the garbage I filled up with today, and the dump will be open tomorrow. I'll be able to unload it, and then pack all my gear in the quad and head up into the mountains for the day. And I'm going to go up to where I filmed that shadow in the timber, and we'll see. I'll just go up there and film it, set up the camera in the same spot and film it just for the hell of it, but more importantly, show you the mountains and get these voices heard from the people. I'm not going to stop. I will figure out a way to somehow, I don't know how to do it, though. I don't know how to get more people heard rapidly, because all you guys can't listen to more than one at the same time anyway, right? So unfortunately, it's going to have to be one by one. Unless, of course, I start ramping up the time. I don't know. That won't be that easy, but I think I've already got them all past a half an hour now. I haven't counted how many get shared in each video, but I know there's a handful, right? But anyway, let me go on with it and not waste any time and get these voices heard. This is very, very important. If you haven't figured out yet what I'm doing, I am getting every single voice heard, because that is where the true power is. That's where the true honesty is, all right? That's how things get turned around, is the people, and only the people. Here we go. I was born and raised in Eastern Oregon. When I was 16, I had a boyfriend who loved the outdoors as much as I do. We spent as much time as we could in the Blue Mountains, fishing in the spring, summer, and hunting in the fall and winter. The summer I turned 17. My boyfriend and I got jobs as wranglers on a dude ranch called the Bar M up in the Blue Mountains. We worked 5 days a week, guiding ranch guests on mountain trail rides. We hauled our own horses in and left them there all summer, but commuted back and forth each day. It was a lot of fun, and I loved riding in the mountains. My horse was a seasoned trail horse, rock steady and willing to go pretty much anywhere I asked. My boyfriend and I would take turns leading or trailing on these rides. On this particular day, I was leading the string, and he was the last one in line. There were about a dozen of us. It was a gorgeous day, sunny and warm, and a few fluffy clouds here and there. We rode along at a leisurely pace, enjoying the fresh mountain air and the scenery. We were about a half hour in when my horse suddenly came to an abrupt halt. Her head flew up, ears pricked forward, and she let out a loud, alarmed snort. I raised my right hand, signaling the other riders to halt. I searched the tree line, trying to see what had scared her so much. It was difficult to focus on anything because my normally placid horse was getting more unruly by the minute. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, next to a huge ponderosa pine tree. I thought, oh my God, that's a huge one. But then it stepped forward out of the trees, and I thought, wait a minute, bears don't walk on their hind legs like that. They don't walk, they shuffle. By this time, my horse was about to lose it, so I turned her around and told everyone we needed to turn back because there was a bear nearby. Thank God they were far enough behind me that none of the other horses got spooked, or it would have been a real rodeo. Oh my God, I can't imagine that one. I mean, I've been guiding hunters one-on-one, or two of them are me max, for years in the Rocky Mountains, and having a wreck kind of sucks, but I couldn't imagine having a whole bunch of people in saddles going bonks. After we got back and untacked and fed the horses, I told my boyfriend what I saw. He, of course, insisted it was a bear, but he didn't see what I saw. I didn't waste much breath trying to convince him, and I never mentioned it to anyone else. I don't know for sure what I saw. I just know it was no damn bear. The next day we headed up the same trails the day before. The ride was uneventful, but my mare was on high alert the whole time. She was skittish and spooky for a long time afterwards. I've had other experiences too, but never another sighting. That's okay with me. Once is enough. Thank you for what you do. Safe hunting, and God bless. You may use my name if you wish. Kathy Wilson. Kathy, absolutely appreciate your bravery and your honesty in sharing what you saw, and it's going to help someone. Okay. And hopefully it helped you too, get it off your chest and be able to share in a safe place. And if your boyfriend has a tough time with it, make sure you send him a couple of videos from my channel and let him chew on those a little bit. All right. Do these beings take deer from hunters? Is the title of this email. Dear Steve, my name is Mark McCall. I'm an avid whitetail hunter and have land near Millen, Georgia. I'm a retired teacher, 31 years, and a wrestling coach. I'm also a U.S. Army veteran and infantryman. I love the outdoors, and like you, have had some experiences with these beings. As I look back on my life, I've had more than one possible experience with these beings. My wife and I listen to your YouTube every day, and since you read your messages, I thought I'd write to you about my experiences with the unusual. I thought I would write to you about my experiences with the unusual when I'm hunting. Being a whitetail hunter in Georgia for the past 30 years, I've had the pleasure of being outdoors and just enjoying still hunting in my deer stand. One Friday evening in November, about 20 years ago, I was hunting just after work, and I noticed a nice buck approaching from my left on the edge of the woods. He stopped about 125 yards from the stand. I lifted up my 7mm Magnum, put a square on his chest, and squeezed off a round. The deer leapt and went straight into the woods. I heard him crash on the ground and flailing about, then silence. I waited another 15 minutes before I got down. Hearing nothing, I thought I ought to go find him before the sun went down, so I eased out of my stand and went to go check. I found the blood trail and exactly where I shot him. The trail was pretty clear for about 15 yards. As soon as I reached the edge of the woods where he had turned in, I heard a sound of something picking up a heavy object and running off away from me as a thief runs away with their prize. I cautiously approached the woods, and about 30 yards inside the tree line, I found the place where the buck had lain down and bled out. It was about a quarter of a deep red heart blood. It was about a quart of deep red heart blood. I thought he couldn't have just gotten up. Well, I began to search for more blood and found a few drops heading north. The trail would go without a drop of blood about once every 10 or 12 feet. I followed this trail about 75 yards, and it was getting dark. I stopped for a moment, and the hair went up in the back of my head. I was being watched. I heard the strangest sounding thing I've ever heard. A howl like an ape along with a few whoops. I figured I would come back in the morning just to see if I could recover my kill. I came back with my buddy, and we looked around the woods and couldn't find anything other than what I had found the evening before. This type of thing happened again with my buddy Tim a few years later. My buddy Scott, bracket, a Cobra attack helicopter pilot, bracket, had hunted the area where I had heard the whooping, and he heard the same thing one morning he had hunted. He told me that he was not going to hunt that spot again. Just this last season, my wife and I were up in my stand, hunting when we heard the howl and whoops. Needless to say, I am an anthropologist and retired educator. Before these experiences, I did not believe in the Sabe. I am apt to believe that they exist and are alive and well in southern Georgia. Sincerely, Mark McCall, Ph.D. P.S. Anytime you want to hunt South Georgia, you're more than welcome to hunt with us. I'll buy you a beer and a steak. Wow. Mark, absolutely appreciate you coming forward, being honest and brave, and sharing what you know and what you saw. And I've seen them too, so I assure you, yes, they are very real, as you know. And welcome to the club of no return. And if I am ever down there, I got some friends in Georgia, southern Georgia too. And if I can, I will definitely look you up, and I'll take you up on that beer and a steak, and maybe we'll go tip some hogs over or something. Be safe out there, man, and make sure you email us back if you ever come across anything that you believe would be helpful to the people. All right? All right, what's this one? Elk hunters surrounded by Bigfoot for days. Wow. Hi, Steve. Feel free to use my name, David Blalak. My name is David Blalak, and I thank you, sir, for all you're doing, for the time you spend on the subjects. My lifelong experiences started in the late 1979 or early 1980 in Northern California. Our family of mom and dad and 6 kids lived in a double-wide mobile home at the end of a very secluded dirt road. The nearest town was Junction City, California. This area is fairly close as the crow flies to the famous Bluff Creek. I was around 8 or 9 years old at the time this went down. It started with the people we rented the trailer from telling my dad and mom about the very large bear that would come down around now and then. It had ripped off the side door that was used as a food pantry, and a piece of thick plywood was screwed down to cover the doorway. My bedroom was almost directly across the hallway from the pantry. During some nights that summer, we all would sit inside and, in complete terror, listen to these screams that boomed from the steep roadless mountainside. The closest comparison to the screams was of a woman being killed or tortured. My mother would cry and tell my dad to help her. My dad would just say to her that it was not a person. Then one day, my oldest brother, who was about 16 years old, ran into the house with a look of terror on his face. He said he found a track that looked like a barefoot human print, but around 20 inches long. My mother wrote it off as a double bear track, but my brother would not accept that. Then late one night, while lying next to my sleeping brother in our bedroom across the hall from the pantry, I was on my back next to the window playing silently with a kitten while 3 other kittens were in the windowsill. The fun ended when the kitten I was holding stopped moving and bristled up. I looked up at the 3 in the window, and they were staring outside and were humped up, like when they're scared or ready to attack something. Their heads all moved in unison, like they were watching something come out of the woods and moving across the small side yard towards the trailer. Then I started hearing the footfalls. The first one was kind of faint, but then boom, boom, boom. They shook the ground, and each step covered a huge area. I followed the steps with my hearing, but I could also see the kittens' heads turning while watching it. It walked right past my room and around the end of the trailer and stopped right at the pantry plywood door. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I lay there frozen in fear. About 5 or 10 seconds later, I felt the nudge against the double-wide trailer, and I heard the cracking sound of the plywood breaking. That was it. I was going to make a break for it to Mom and Dad's room at the other end of the house. So I snuck out of bed as fast and quiet as I could and slowly turned the doorknob, knowing this thing was right across the hallway with nothing between us. This was the only way for me to reach the safety of Dad. The doorknob made a very slight click sound. I barely heard it, but it definitely did too because it took off running back the way it come. Again, the weight of the steps and the speed it moved was mind-blowing. It made it from one side of the double wide around the end and along the other side by my room in like 5 steps. I ran as fast as I could into Mom and Dad's room and into bed with them. Of course, they did not believe me that a monster broke the house. The next day, Mom and older brother picked us younger kids up from school, and when I climbed in the car, my brother asked me if I remembered the event from the night before. I said yes, and he told me to wait until we got home. So when we got there, we all walked to the pantry door and looked up at the top of it. The plywood had one set of claw or nail gouges where it had pushed the plywood in at the top. This end of the trailer was on blocks and at least 2 or 3 feet off the ground. The break was at the top of the doorway. This puts the height at around 9 feet where it was broken. This is confirmed by my mom, and she will not believe it wasn't a black bear. Steve, you and I both know that there are no black bears reaching up that high and pushing in plywood. Blackies will pry out something they are breaking into, and because they are skittish, they will do it down low for easy escape. It was not a bear. Those footfalls still haunt me at night. This is the first of several experiences, and I will send the others, which are more intense and, well, kind of crazy sounding. Thank you again, Steve, for the Roundtable of Truth. Every word I speak to you is the truth and real. And I don't doubt you for a second, my man. David, thanks for sending that in, man. And we are absolutely interested in hearing what else you have to share, as it'll hopefully help you get off your chest, and it just might possibly help some people that live near you, or just help somebody who's listening right now. And that's what we're getting at, all right? Thanks again for sending that in. Make sure you email more, all right? All right. Here's a new one, another one. Hello, Steve, Bonnie here. I'm a follower of your show. I love your courage and your forest pirate attitude. Remember when you can see clearly and you can feel alone to stick to your knowingness. I live off the grid for 7 months of the year on 100 acres of family property in Quebec. There's a community of Sabe people here who share the place with me, my husband, and my stay-at-home forever son. I saw a being last summer for the first time. He turned around and headed in the opposite direction. I've heard them calling to each other late into the night. We came up after Christmas this year, and a being terrorized us during a snowstorm. He pounded on the roof of our cabin for a good 2 hours. Wow. Then I awake from the crazy dream with the Sasquatch in my dream. The next morning I noticed tracks in the snow beside our cabin, a good 6 to 7 feet apart. We came up early in the spring, and I noticed tracks everywhere in the swamp in a ravine beside the cabin, all sizes. Then the tree tapping started, super close and very loud, slow, fast, and varied. I said out loud what I had heard on your show, quote, "Please don't make me feel afraid," end quote. They immediately stopped, and there was nothing for a while. Then slowly and gradually, they've been trying to make contact with me, very respectfully. I've noticed many areas where they have marked off with bent trees as their territory. I try to respect those areas. I don't feel afraid or threatened, more safe and like they are curious. I'll keep you posted on my encounters. Keep up your excellent work, Bonnie. Okay, Bonnie, thanks for that, and be careful, all right? It's somewhat proving to be true that seeking out contact with these beings, whoever, whatever they are, isn't really the more safe thing to do on average. I'm not saying every time. We've got various flavors of experience to be shared, but it doesn't seem to be that good of a thing on average. So just keep your wits about you. Go with your stomach, meaning go with your guts, go with your instincts. All right? And thank you so much again for sharing that with us. Here's another one. Strange feeling / encounter. Hello, Steve. My name is Alex. I don't mind if you use my first name, although nothing is super interesting. I was watching a recent video of yours. A submitter questioned on it if your horses have noticed any strange instances. The question was kind of brushed over. I'm very interested on if you've noticed if your horses have seemingly noticed anything. I've been an avid viewer for about 6 months now. I'm on the complete opposite of many of your viewers. I'm a woman in her early 20s. I own a dressage horse. We live in southwest Michigan. During our scheduled trail rides at our various stables, we would hit a 1 kilometer portion of trail where we'd both panic a little. Just that feeling of leave now. I always remember once I got to the pine, it felt safe again. The horse agreed too. It wasn't every time, just sometimes. Sometimes we were alone, other times with friends, but whatever it was sheer horror. It happened on different horses, and while I was with different riders, others noticed it well. I laughed it off as anxiety until last summer. I had moved barns, although only 3 miles from the last. My show horse is now semi-retired to trails only. Honestly, I had forgotten about the experience we had had at the previous stables. We picked up a canter as the sun was setting. It was a beautiful summer evening, although we had the same uneasy feeling. Then my horse panicked, and I fell off of him. As I got up, I felt like prey. That's the only description I have. My horse ran about 50 meters from me. Super abnormal for him. As I stood up, I heard rocks tumbling down the railroad tracks 100 meters or so in front of me. I felt pure dread as I walked my horse out of that first field back to the barn. In my head, I told myself it had to have been deer. However, the tracks were in clear view. I saw no deer. Non-equine related. About 3 years ago, I noticed an orb, white/yellow orb, that I saw 3 or 4 times in 2 months. It instilled so much fear into me that I haven't been able to sleep without both blinds and blackout curtains since. It slowly floated by my window, literally like a bubble. Funny enough, my house is positioned directly in between the 2 stables, almost perfectly. I simply refuse to look outside after dark anymore, and I'm planning to move to the other side of the world. Partially due to the fear I feel where I live. I have no idea if this could be what you speak of in your videos or if you can use this information. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you, Alex. Wow. All right, Alex. That's a shitty deal. The terror sucks, and you sought out this channel. You've listened to a lot of these emails. It's very, very common, right? But so far, it's not common to have people writing in feeling the terror and then getting physically harmed. But I'm gonna have to say it, the people that do get harmed, obviously they're not going to be around to email us in what happened after they felt the terror and then were harmed, right? So I don't know. My advice to you, I can't. You know what it was. You know what you were hearing after you've heard from these literally hundreds and hundreds of first-hand eyewitnesses on this channel alone. But you have to go with your sixth sense. You have to go with your gut instincts. All right, Alex, just do it. Follow your gut instincts. Follow your intuition. No one else's but yours. And you listen to it at all costs. All right? And it's usually right. I know it's right for me. I listen to my gut no matter what anybody says to me. I listen to my gut with all of my... Well, actually, I use it for day-to-day decisions now, but I use it for every single big decision. I go with my gut instincts. So, be safe out there, and I hope if you move away, it doesn't mean you're moving away from your horse. I don't know how you could do that. That'd be tough for me. Oh, sorry, you asked me questions. My horse there. Where I ride, you got to take into account that where I ride, especially up north, it's just absolutely wild and remote. There's grizzly bears, wolves, wolverine, moose, black bear, elk. There's just so many different game animals running the same trails we run in this thick bush, the timber bush. Sometimes all burns until we get up in the alpine. So
I haven't had the exact same strip of trail. I haven't had terror on a trail up north yet with my horse. I haven't experienced terror with any of my horses myself. I have obviously, I know how horses react to being stressed out and feeling threatened for sure. And surprisingly, it's not from grizzly bears on the trail ahead of you. It's usually from moose and wolves. They don't like wolves. But that's about it for me. But I'm sure if somebody else is listening to this, and they can answer in the comment section below, and you can seek it out. And if anybody could touch bases on this, if you got a strip of horse trail, or even with your horses and you've sensed terror with them, maybe you could touch base and drop a comment of what it was you experienced and what happened. But anyways, if you do move away, Alex, be safe and above all, be happy, all right? All right, a Bigfoot encounter story for Steve to share from Steve. Hey, Steve, I'm hooked on your channel. Great stuff, bud. My name is Steve as well. You can use my first name if you like. My wife and I recently watched the Missing 411 show on Netflix. From there, it's like I want to get all the info I can about Bigfoot. I'm now 40 years old and had an encounter at the age of 17 that I'll never forget. It was in a small town in North Carolina outside of Raleigh. My friend and I were driving back to his house down what at the time was a backcountry road, but now there are houses and developments everywhere. My truck broke down, popped a tire, and that's when I found out I had no spare. That sucks. That was my luck back then. His house is about 5 miles away, straight down the road we were on, so we started walking. We're about 500 yards away from a country dump site on our left. It's about midnight at this point, and we see a car stop on the road, and two guys jump the fence from inside the dump area to get into the car. Me and my buddy were like, they just robbed that place, and we're witnessing. They may try to get us, knowing we saw. This is where the story gets interesting. The left side of the road was wooded, so we ran and hid about 30 feet into the woods while we waited for the car to pass. The car ended up passing, so we decided to sit there for a minute to see if he would circle around again for another pass. Well, he did. When he left, we heard loud noises coming from behind us deeper in the woods, limbs breaking and leaves rustling. I've hunted and killed many deer. The noises and breaks were much more than a deer can do. It was dark, so I didn't get a great look, but it was about 8 feet tall and dark and pushed a small tree to the side as it got within 25 feet from us. Oh, that sucks. We immediately started for the road and ran the next mile and a half without stopping, except for my friend who fell, got skinned up from the road, and still ran screaming and crying. We didn't really talk to anyone about it for fear of being ridiculed or called liars. To this day, I believe what we saw and heard was a Bigfoot, and I think we will have the answers in my lifetime with the way technology is evolving. Keep up the good work, Steve. I love hearing all the great info of your channel, bud, and be safe. Thanks for your bravery and honesty, man. Thanks for sharing here. I know I'm speaking for everybody when they say they appreciate it. And be safe out there, Steve, all right? Okay. Rolling along. Let's keep these going. Got to get everybody heard. What do we got? Hi, Steve. My name is Mike Alexander, and I'm in Upper East Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains. I'm an Army and Air Force veteran, avid hunter, ordained Baptist preacher, and follow your channel and listening to the stories people share with us, and want to thank you, Steve, for passing those along to everyone else. I've read Scott Carpenter's book on the DNA study and find it very informative. The purpose of this email is twofold. First, some of my own experience and a viewpoint into the biblical references many have made, which I would like to address as a studier of the Greek and Hebrew texts. My first story is when I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was squirrel hunting on the side of the mountain not far from my granny's farm, where I now live. I made my way up the ridges and hollers to the top and bagged a couple of good grays and began to make my way back down the mountain, meandering across the ridges at an angle when I came upon a little ridge top about 60 yards wide. The strange thing I noticed first was every tree was dead, and each one had the bark peeled around the bottoms where it fell. These were hardwood trees, and not the evergreen hemlocks that acid rain had killed at higher altitudes. But that was not the weirdest thing, Steve. It was the depressive feeling of dread that was like a huge weight on me. I had not felt it before I got to this particular spot or felt after I left it. There was also no bird sounds or any critters for that matter. I have never felt that again in the woods, and it is etched into my mind. My next experience happened only a few years ago during the whitetail muzzleloader season, and I was scouting around for acorns and such, and found a good spot to hang my stand the next day, and decided to sit down at the base. Alright, we're missing a bunch of periods here, so bear with me, you guys. This must be that talk text thing that people do. I've never done it myself, but it must be tough to get the periods in there. So here we go. And decided to sit down at the base of the big red oak tree to wait for sunset. I was in a good active area for deer, so I figured what the heck, I may see something. I do a lot of stalking and grouse hunting as well. Anyway, the light faded, my truck was parked less than a quarter mile away on the access road in the Cherokee National Forest. The tree I was sitting at was no more than 30 yards from a motorcycle/ATV trail. However, this part is rarely used this time of year, November, especially late in the day. When it got dark enough, I felt I could not make an accurate shot on an animal. I got up. My eyesight is not good at low light anymore at 60 years old, and made my way quietly from the tree across the ATV trail to another 40 yards to the dirt road, and I walked only about 60 yards up the road toward my truck when it happened. A scream like I had never heard before. It was loud, deep, and guttural. I immediately swung around with my body and 50 cal as one, but did not bring it to my shoulder, as I saw nothing from where the sound came from. Even though the light was almost gone, I could see the spot where I was sitting just a few minutes before, and that is exactly where the scream came from. Steve, growing up, we could stand on my granny's porch as a kid and hear the panthers scream on the mountain above. I cannot forget how they sounded, like a woman screaming very loudly, filled with the hollers in the hills. Like a woman screaming very loudly that filled the hollers and hills. But this was no panther. I have listened to almost every vocalization of North American wildlife, from cougars to owls and everything in between, and nothing comes close. The only recording close is from the First Nations man, wife, and child recording the howl scream from the smartphone of a supposed Sasquatch or something. It only screamed once and then nothing. The next day I went back and looked all around, even in the ATV trail, which is pretty much powdery sand being churned up by dirt bike tires, and found dirt bike tires and found nothing, no tracks or anything. I've been to the spot a few times since scouting with no luck, as it seems the deer have moved on. I can't explain any of this, and I wish I could. The areas I hunt are usually not frequented by anyone, with only a passing ATV/dirt bike on occasion, but they do not stop. You never see any vehicles on the access road, as it is 4x4 only and very rough. I will not go into any panther stories while hunting, and the Forest Service and Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency claim they are not here, as having been killed off in the 1800s by farmers, but we locals know better. Now on the biblical explanation of Sasquatch. I was told as a young preacher by an elderly and much wiser old preacher that where the Bible is silent on a subject, we should also be silent. I will say this is fact stated in the Bible, and this is not to offend anyone. No, sir. My intention is to try and help, as I was called by God into the ministry. I did not go to school to learn how to preach, but to let God through the Spirit guide me, and always staying with the Bible literally. I just wish people would open theirs more to learn. Number 1. Cain's line ended with a flood, as only 8 souls were saved. These include Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their 3 wives. Pretty simple, as Noah was the line of Seth. 2. The sons of God mentioned in Genesis is much debated in theological circles, and in most instances refers to the angels. However, Jesus said in Matthew 22 that the angels do not marry. Recent archaeological discoveries suggest that the phrase sons of God was sometimes used to refer to describe kings. These immortal kings had used the power to take as many and whatever women they chose. The word giant comes from the Hebrew word Nephilim, the fallen ones, or the more literal translation is to overthrow, fall upon. These giants were violent and had no respect for others. To support this, the children of Anak, Goliath, and his brothers were giants, but not the result of some unnatural union between a mortal woman and angels. Number 3. Nowhere in the Bible are any giants described as hairy, and were merely human men of very large stature. Goliath was 9'9" tall. I guess, Steve, what I'm getting at is there is nothing in the Bible that talks about anything like Sasquatch. But that by no means I am saying they're not real. The evidence is overwhelming. There is something out there, and I believe people have seen these things wholeheartedly. I'm just trying to shed light on what the Word of God has to say or doesn't. Keep up the good work as a mouthpiece for so many. Thanks, Mike. P.S. Feel free to use my name if you want. All right. Mr. Mike Alexander, thank you so much for that share. I absolutely appreciate you and the time you took for us to share that with us. And I'll remind everyone, take from it what you will or leave it. All right? And Mike, if you come across anything you feel valuable for the people, you can help us, make sure you please do share it, all right? And get it into us and share it. Anything you can that will help the people, all right? Be safe out there, sir. All right, here's another one, titled The Kandahar Giant. Steve, thank you for all the time that you put into your videos, giving people a voice. It's very important for the times we're living in. If you're interested in the Kandahar Giant information, look up L.A. Mazzulli. He is a filmmaker and writer. L.A. interviewed the special ops team that went in looking for the first team that did not report back in. L.A. vetted this eyewitness, and the story he tells is horrific. If I'm recalling correctly, L.A. also interviewed the pilot that flew the dead giant out of Kandahar. The stories that you read triggered a memory that I had from my childhood. I'm 68, and this occurred back in the late 1950s. My family was staying overnight at a family friend's camp. This camp was in a very rural area on a dirt road in central New York on the Oneida Lake. I and another boy were sleeping in the boathouse. There was one small window on the side of the boathouse about 9 feet off the ground. During the middle of the night, I awake, scared for some reason. I could feel like someone was looking at me through these small portal-type windows. Other than just telling my wife about this experience, this is the first time I shared this story. I cannot think of anything else that this could have been but a Sasquatch. No one could see through these windows from the ground. And why would it be awaked from sleeping and scared? Thank you for all that you are doing for the people. I pray that you and Sarah will be blessed. Mark Brayton, Concord, North Carolina. If you want to read this, that's fine. If not, I'm okay with that too. Oh, I read it, man. Mark, thank you so much for sending that into us, and I absolutely appreciate it. And that reminds me, years ago, I was about 15 or 14 years old, and a buddy of mine, we had joined speed skating to help our hockey skating, and he ended up he was a natural power skater. He ended up going into speed skating, and he was destined to go into the Olympics. But anyway, his parents had signed him up for a training school in Jasper, Alberta, in the Rocky Mountains, and there was a spare spot, so I managed to go with him. It was the middle of summertime, and I think we went for a week, and we went, I forget the name of the river, but we went up this river. It was in Banff. We were in Banff, sorry, because I remember we hiked up Mount Norquay, the ski hill, but we were staying in remote cabins, and I think it was about 3 miles up a river on our bicycles to get to these camps. And I remember the person who stayed there full time, the man that managed the cabins himself, I remember him telling us that one night something strange happened, and every single person in every one of those cabins woke up wide awake in the middle of the night at the same time, and everybody's terrified. And they couldn't figure it out. And that's funny. That just reminded me of it now, but it's just funny that I remember that from when I was a teenager. But anyway, thanks for sending that email, man. Appreciate it. Big time. And I'm going to get one more out here, and then I got to go catch horses. They're out running around getting fat. Hollow cedar trees and Sabe. Hello, Steve. Thank you for listening to People Without Judgment. It is a hard trait to find today. Your caring nature also comes across very strongly. I could go on, but I will get right to the point. I've spent the last 40-plus years among the Anishinaabe people of central Canada. Community members have had encounters with the Mesabi here about 20-plus years ago. And my son had his first encounter with the Memegwaswag. Memegwasikwak. All right, so this is the word pronounced. Memegwasiwak, or little people, when he was 2.5. I was very interested in the account shared by the nurse, A. Osborne about the young man who was dragged into a cedar tree. This account calls to mind Les Stroud's Survivorman Bigfoot encounter Bluff Creek episode, where he and a friend heard knocking coming from inside a cedar tree. No shit, I didn't hear about that. Perhaps you and Les can compare notes. And I thought you must. Okay. Thank you, and wishing you continued strength and wellness, Kate. All right, Kate, thanks for that. Appreciate it. If you come across any first-hand encounters from the First Nations people, Kate, please share it with us if you're able, all right? And we'd really, really appreciate that. I appreciate the time you took to email us. It banged on my house is the title of this email, and every time I hear that, it kind of makes me shiver a little bit because I experienced that by myself in a small cabin, and it's not a pleasant experience. Hi, Steve. I've followed your channel since you only had about 30,000 subscribers. Thank you for all you do and for helping so many people here. I debated whether to write in, but my experience scared the crap out of me and my son, and I think sharing it might help others. I live in rural Northern California. I want to share this because many people hear of walls getting slapped, but it is in a remote area, or a camping tent, or a logging camp, or at a house that blocks up to a wood, or at a house that backs up to a wood. Not for us. We're out in wide open farmland for miles around. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer with many years of experience investigating crime scenes in the Bay Area. Those skills were of zero use after our experience. I might add that my husband was also retired from law enforcement, and we are not a family to panic or overreact. Anyway, this happened in about 2018. My son and I were home, and it was after sundown on a very dark night. My son was about 16 years old then. All of a sudden, there came a huge impact on the north side of my house. It literally shook the house. My first thought was that a neighbor's bull had gotten out and rammed the house. Then I wondered if a car had hit the house. Then, just seconds later, another huge bang rang out on the east side of the house against the living room wall. My son and I were both very alarmed, to say the least, and were on our feet. There had been news stories of home invasions in rural areas, and that also crossed my mind as my brain struggled to assess what was happening. I reflexively went into a tactical mindset and grabbed my handgun, and as I rushed to close the blinds over the windows so whatever or whomever it was could not be able to see us inside, I quietly told my son to get a gun and turn off all the lights. As we did this, there was yet another impact, this time on the south side of the house. These bangs were so strong as to shake the pictures on the wall like a sonic boom. And clearly whatever was doing the banging was huge, strong, and circling the house. The impact came in such quick succession that I was thinking there were several culprits acting together. As we got the lights turned off, I went to turn off the dining room light, but then realized the sliding glass doors that lead out to the back deck were not locked. In order for me to cut that light, it'd have to be exposed in front of the glass doors. Those doors were only about 12 feet from where we had heard and felt an impact on the same side of the house just moments before. I retreated a few steps. I stopped in the living room, adjacent to the dining room, and in a hushed tone directed my son to get in front of the fireplace as the bricks offered us some cover from gunfire if that were to happen. I stood there, heart pounding, my son just behind me, both of us with handguns at the low, ready position. I then realized that I had grabbed my .40 caliber semi-auto and I only had 10 rounds, and my son had hastily grabbed a .38 revolver with only 6 rounds. I was trying to act calm for my son, but I was not calm. I told my son if they come through the glass doors, check his target before firing and watch for crossfire, reminding him of our limited ammo in our handguns and to make it count. Really, Steve, it was like I was back working in the city streets of South Oakland, California, waiting for a deadly confrontation. The heart was pounding, controlling my breathing, on high alert. But this was my house, and I needed to protect my son, and the mom in me was on full alert too. Then, after just a few moments of us waiting in silence for something else to happen, my husband came in the sliding glass doors. As he came in, I raised my gun, then I saw it was him, just as quickly lowered my gun, but kept it at the ready. He saw us both standing there with the guns in the ready position, and froze in place, with the sliding door open behind him. I told him to get inside and lock the door. He did so, much slower than I would have liked. Then he looked at us with a puzzled expression. He asked what was going on, and we told him. Then, after a short and comfortable pause, he tried to tell us that he had done it and he was just messing with us. But Steve, I can tell you, there is no way it was my husband just messing with us. I say this for several reasons. He had come home very drunk. There is no way he could have run around the house and hit the walls that rapidly, even if he had been cold sober and it was daylight. But he was very drunk, and it was very dark. Yes, he came home drunk. That is another issue. Just saying it to explain there is no way it was him. Also, he was not big or strong enough to make such impacts that rapidly. After a short talk among the three of us and no more bangs, my husband retreated to the bedroom and watched TV. He tried to laugh it off, told us we were crazy, but we were not laughing. My son and I calmed down and spoke of what happened. We had no explanation, and there was no way we were going outside to check. The next morning I went into full crime scene investigation mode, determined to find evidence to figure out what or who did that to our home. Steve, I can tell you I've used tweezers to collect hairs from a windshield, so I could have the lab matched blood and hair samples to prove exactly who the driver was in a drunk driving fatality. I've done crime scene diagrams for assault committed with vehicles. I've helped process murder scenes. I really did go all CSI. Steve, there was nothing. No footprints, no scuff marks in the dirt on the side of the house, no scuffs on the old wood shingle siding on the house, no hairs, no fibers, nothing to indicate that anything at all had even contacted the side of the house, let alone hit it so hard as to rattle the house. I looked again and again, nothing. That part really messed with my mind, and my son's as well. Later, after some time, my son suggested it could have been Sasquatch, so we talked about it. That was when we realized that at the time of the banging, the two dogs in the house did not bark. The humans were scared and taking defensive postures, but the dogs were not. And you know as well as I do, that's absolutely not normal. I was very skeptical because the wooded area is miles away. My son thinks it was probably a juvenile or two that were just screwing with us, like doing a dare such as a doorbell ditch. Well, if that is so, those huge bastards did the deed and scared us good. From what I've read, they could easily cover a few miles in a short time if they came from the hills. The dark night would give them concealment, so a forest was not needed for them to hide. That theory actually, over time, made more and more sense to me. Fast forward some years, and I'm now widowed, living alone. It had been many years since that incident, when strange things started happening again. No wall slaps, but I had some sightings. In 2019, I was sitting in the living room, and from there I can see through a small hallway and into a guest room that has a window. One day in daylight, I saw a huge, hair-covered face walk right by that window. It looked just like images we have seen of Sasquatch. Nothing else happened, but with the height of that window, whatever walked by it was at least 7-8 feet tall. And again, zero physical evidence, no footprints, etc. Even though it was daylight, I did not want to go look. My dog never stirred from her nap. Then, a few days later, well after sundown, I saw a silhouette of a Sasquatch standing on the deck near my front door. This one was only about 6 feet tall, shoulders about 4 feet wide, no neck, dark hair. I clearly saw it, but when I blinked, it was gone. No thud of it retreating footfalls, no smell, it was just gone. Not funny. This is my home. I don't have a cannon and my dog can't take up arms, so I had to find another method of home defense from these trespassers. There's no way I want another banging episode, especially now that I'm living alone. So I went researching. I found Scott Carpenter's channel and did what he suggested about how to keep them from coming to your home. Basically, you pray and ask for protection on your property and ask the blessing from God. So far this has worked. I've not been bothered and had no sightings. You can also use trail cameras to make a perimeter fence, but I have not needed to do that yet. When I take my dog out for a pee before bed at night, I always have a gun and a flashlight with me and keep her on the lead. I guard her while she does business. Most of the time I'm carefree, but every once in a while I just have that uneasy feeling and watch my back as we get inside. My dogs are my friends and also my guards. When they bark, I let them, and when they alert but do not bark, I pay closer attention. I also watch my horses when they look and their ears. If I come home after dark and my cats do not greet me, I sit in my vehicle a while to be sure there isn't a mountain lion lurking about or something much larger. So far, so good. I've had other encounters and have seen one of these beings along Highway 140 in southern Oregon, about 10 miles east of White City. But the night that one, or more, somethings rammed the side of my house, that struck with me. You can't unsee, unhear, forget that stuff. Steve, I've been shot at, been in fights on duty, and had bad guys try to take my gun from me, and others try to kill me. That I can deal with, like you keeping your cool with a grizzly bear. But when something that big attacks your home and you realize that you are outclassed and that whatever firearm you have available is most likely very inadequate, it is hard to deal with. I'm thinking about it now, sitting in the same living room as I type this out, my 2 dogs napping by my side, calm, but remembering, wondering if something large and hairy is watching the house. Sorry for a long email, but I really hope if this happened to someone else, they may consider that possibly it might have been a Sasquatch and not humans, and they can get info from Scott Carpenter. His advice worked for me, and I've had more peace at my home. Oh, on a video you recently did, the one where you felt uneasy and packed up and stopped filming, it occurred to me that you had started reading on an email and had said aloud a native name for the Sabe, and then the forest went silent and you felt pressure and left. I don't know if I'm speaking their name aloud was the cause or related, but I noticed that. Steve, I also want to extend sincere condolences on the unexpected loss to Mr. Macaroni. As I always say, that a horse isn't worth crying over, isn't worth having. I hope you love the new place you're moving to, and I wish you continued success. With gratitude, Misty C. Misty, it wasn't too long. It was very detailed, well written out, and I want to thank you so much for taking your time to share that with us. I think I'm coming to the point I have my own theories on what happens, what is going on with these things. Maybe I'll make a summary soon of various points, what I've learned, what I believe. And right now, just to tap on where you closed your eyes and open them is gone. I am really starting to look into the vibration, or energy vibration, or different vibrations and possible of the parallel existence, parallel to us, but vibrating differently out of our sight. Possibly. That really has my interest. And if it is true, well, it does make sense. I mean, how can something appear and then just disappear? Just like that. And it has been noted and emailed in and spoken of out loud so many times, it is ridiculous. So many times. It's almost every time someone has a daytime visual of these things, they look away for 1 second or blink and they look back, it's gone. Right? Now, if it's a different vibration, if the person that is seeing these somehow, if the person that is witnessing this is possibly vibrating, their energy is vibrating at that's just the right frequency, possibly, or are these beings' energy vibrating just off enough to be in the same zone as each other? Possibly. I don't know. I'm babbling a little bit, but anyway, I'm glad that you found some peace there. I'm also glad you're taking care of yourself and watching your back. And if anything, I'm sure if you already talked to Scott and looked into what he suggests, you got it dialed in. But I would light up that place. It just made me sick to picture you sitting in your car alone, wondering if it was safe to get out of it or not. Nobody there to open up the door of your home and to welcome you home or walk you in. That kind of bugs me when I read that. But light that place up. All right, get some floodlights and light that place up like a ballpark where you park and walk into your door, okay? And be safe, and don't be shy if you want to email in more in the future, all right? Thank you very much, Misty, and be safe out there. And everybody else, too. And you got something you want to add to this? Anybody? Something you feel is going to share? Something you feel is going to help the people? Get it in. Share my story at howtohunt.com or tell my story at howtohunt.com, and it'll get shared.